Good morning and welcome to another week of Journey with Christ here on the Park Avenue YouTube channel. We are so glad you joined us. My name is Mark Mitchell. I'm the preaching minister at the Park Avenue Church of Christ in Charleston, West Virginia. And I am joined, as usual, with Steve Fox, a preaching minister for over 50 years. How you doing today, buddy?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the welcome. I'm doing fine. I'm kind of getting drained, I think, like everybody else is, because the world's drained. I mean, you know, we never thought we were going to go through this, not in the United States or even in the rest of the world, but we never thought we'd spend this much time trying to correct this problem and trying to find a solution. And there are people who are a whole lot smarter than we are, scientists and doctors, that are trying to fix this, and it seems like it's just getting worse every day. The figures you see, the graphs, the lines are going up instead of going down the other way. And especially when it hits somebody that you know. I mean, when I was growing up, you looked at the numbers every night while you were eating supper to see how many of our soldiers were killed in Vietnam. Well, after a while, those numbers don't mean anything. Yeah. And that's kind of what this has turned into, too, with the virus. Susie and I have two friends who are both in the hospital and both have the virus, and neither one of them are doing very well. And Mark, it just makes you feel helpless. Can't do anything. I mean, their families aren't even allowed to go in and see them. Preachers aren't allowed to go in to see them. I just feel like the whole world just feels restless because there's not anything we can do. Hopefully this vaccine thing works, but good grief, you're even having trouble with that now. People are arguing about it, and you know there'll be some fraud and corruption involved there too. But this book that we have been studying, and I don't think this is a coincidence, this revelation that we have been studying has one theme, and that is that God's going to win. Now, I want it to be tomorrow, you want it to be tomorrow. It might be a year from now, it might be 10 years from now, it might be 20 years from now, but the people in the first century who were Christians, who had put their lives on the line, they were trusting that those things which would shortly come to pass, it's going to happen in a hurry and God will take care of it. But God never says, okay, you know, here's 5 years or 10 years, and we just like to snap our fingers and get it over with. At least I know I would. And I'm thinking, as probably half the people in the world are thinking, God, can you not see this? Do you not see what's going on? Well, of course He sees what's going on. So why don't you fix it? And that kind of drainage, I think, is difficult for all of us to deal with. But if we just remember from Revelation, those people in the first century were told, God's going to win. Yeah. And if you want to be on the winning side, you choose the Lamb of God. Right. And if we can, you know, assert that message to as many different people as we can, maybe it'll be a little bit better, and maybe we won't be talking about this very much longer.
Well, as you said several times, we have a tendency as human beings, one of our good qualities, but sometimes goes too far, is that we want to tinker and fix things, and so we think we know what exactly needs to happen. And the book of Revelation reveals to us that, okay, there is a battle going on between two entities for the minds and the attitudes and the disposition of human beings. Mm-hmm. And Satan has a large arsenal at his command. And he can do things that disrupt our worlds, which cause us then to doubt and can you imagine the doubt the first century Christians had? You know,
how much longer is it going to be?
Yeah, oh Lord, how much longer are you going to? I mean, we began in Revelations 1, 2, and 3. Oh Lord, how much longer are these people going to be died and martyred and so forth? And the writer tells us Okay, there is a battle. And of course now we're right in the middle of this thing. And we want, like you say, we want it to be over, and we want it all to be back to what we consider to be normal.
It's real easy to say, hold on.
Yeah.
Or when was the last time somebody said to you, don't worry about that, and you stopped worrying about it?
Oh, yeah.
It happens all the time, right?
All the time.
Yeah. But, and you're right about this great idea we're Americans. We fix things.
Yeah.
And that's why we go into a foreign country and we're going to take over and show them how to do it, and then we're going to go into another foreign country because we fix things like that.
We're smart.
Well, look at the United States now and see how well we're fixing
I think
things.
we look all around the world. I don't see any nation out there now that demonstrates any overall virtues. It just says, "Hey, I'm ready to move there."
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't see.
Maybe Vatican City, that might be the closest.
I don't know. I don't think
Well, they've had trouble too recently.
Yeah. There is right now, going back to what you said a second ago about studying this book of Revelations right now. I think right now we're getting a really good view of the power of Satan and what he can cause people to do.
Yes.
And when societies now are operating under his banner and his standards.
And if this book is true, he's going to get what he deserves one of these days.
Well, we better get to it because
we might get there.
We might get to the end here.
All right, we're going to start now, and we're going to read Revelation chapter 17, beginning with verse 1. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute, who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She had a golden cup in her hand filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. All this imagery that we have been having since we started begins to culminate into I think a better description of who and what this storyline is about, because we have a lot of clues in this particular chapter. The prostitute. It's called Babylon, and she's called the mother of all prostitutes, which would say that there have been many that's come after her.
I think you can narrow it down to she's fooling around with the wrong nations.
Yeah.
And those nations are fooling around with her.
Yeah.
Being unfaithful to God.
Well, and I was listening to one person, right, and because oftentimes we read the Bible and we use our modern understanding of certain words and apply them to something that was written 2,000 years ago, and that doesn't work. Adultery doesn't mean just fornication. Adultery is any time we do something that breaks the covenant that we have with someone else.
Yeah.
And so adultery is like you say, is making treaties in context, because God doesn't think, be careful who you make treaties. I mean, there's a lot of those in Proverbs.
There's a bunch of passages in the Old Testament that say Israel and other nations were unfaithful to God.
Yeah.
So there's not a list there, but it's kind of it winds up with this woman, and your translation says the prostitute. The Revised Standard says she's a great harlot.
Great harlot.
Yeah. And And here's a judgment again in verse 1, the judgment of that great harlot. You got judgments all the way through here. And also, you're trying to figure out, who is this woman? What was she in the first century? How did she act in the first century? And she's got a lot of people that are on her side. 666, the land beast, the sea beast that's coming out of the land and the sea. And now he sees this woman who's kind of going to go into battle with her friends, her buddies. But again, when that judgment happens, she loses.
And it's not like this expression, we know that it's in Daniel 7, some of this stuff. So it's not just brand new here. This has been going on for this descriptive term used as God's way of saying to the people, I understand the seduction of government powers, much like maybe today. America is absolutely inundated with various political prostitutes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to come out and say that it's wrong to have an allegiance to or an ideology about how governments should be run, and I vote too. But I don't think God intends for us to put our faith in these entities to sustain us and for us to have life here on the earth that He created. It wasn't Satan. Satan is all he wants to do is manipulate it and degrade it, and he presents things and
that are tempting.
That are tempting. I mean, there's no man alive. Well, there may be a few, but there are very few men who see someone who's very seductive, who's very intriguing, who presents themselves, that you don't stand there and look just for a second or two and think to yourself, wow, Mm-hmm. It is.
Would you like to lay down on the couch and we can talk about that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
But you're right that there are other countries and other individuals that just draw us to them. We're attracted to them. And like I said, in the Old Testament, you got all these foreign countries that are trying to get good with Rome or get good with Jerusalem. And so you got to, one of the things you have to try to figure out is, who is this woman? Is this woman Jerusalem or is this woman Rome? Those are the two basic ideas that you have.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a combination of both, because if you look back in the first century, Jews were killing Christians and Romans were killing Christians. And so you've got that identity that you have to pinpoint.
Yeah, but as we get a little further down in here, we get a couple hints that we sort of think that it is Rome who is this adulterous prostitute or harlot. And I actually like the expression of prostitute, because prostitute says you're giving something to get something. Mm-hmm. And it's generally...
Well, I wouldn't know that, but I guess you're right.
Well, then, you're an uneducated man. And the woman is described... Go ahead.
Whoever this Babylon is, this woman, whoever the great harlot is, or whether you want to call her the harlot or the prostitute or whatever, whoever that is, according to verse 5, she's the mother of harlots.
Yeah.
And of earth's abominations. So Rome fits that category, because Rome was doing everything they could possibly do wrong to make sure that they weren't obeying God. And Jerusalem was doing the same thing. So it could be Jerusalem, it could be Rome, but whichever one it is, John says she is drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus.
Yeah.
So their main intent was to destroy these new Christians in the first century.
Yeah, and we'll get down to here a descriptive term of this woman that kind of helps us narrow this Jerusalem and Rome thing down. And you're right. This reference to the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people. Drunk just means you don't have the right. Trying to look for the right word here. I had
Control. You don't have the control.
You have no control. You have been diminished. You no longer are capable of doing things in a intellectual pattern. I mean, you do not think well. You have no wisdom. Virtually, you've submitted yourself to something else that controls you. And power, evidently, is very seductive in that nature, in the fact that saw the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people. How do you get drunk with the blood of God's holy people? By killing them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
they weren't supposed to drink blood in the first place.
They weren't, of course. Yeah. And this is just a scenario where they have done so much, they have lost they've lost their mind with it. They have no reasoning anymore. Continuing in verse 6. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destination. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because it once was, now is not, and yet will come. This calls for a mind with wisdom." Boy, does it ever.
That leaves us out. Yeah.
The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other is yet to come. But when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. That verse, that section of verse of 6 through 8 really cleared up for me. Who was, but isn't, but is yet to come.
Did you ever get your kid a box for Christmas, and it comes with a little pamphlet that says, "Follow these easy and simple instructions"? That when you were reading that, I mean, I know what's in there.
Yeah, I can see it.
But I can see it, but it's still just, you got all these bad people, the harlot, the prostitute, the old Jerusalem, the 7 kings. And by the way, when you read 7 kings there in verse 10, I want to continue to encourage you to look and see all the way through here what the kings did, and then see what happens to them in 21 and 22. See what happens to those kings. Some people, you mentioned the one who is and the other's not yet come, and when he comes he must remain for a little while. A lot of people who write commentaries on Revelation say that those are the Caesars.
Yeah.
And those Caesars, there was one there, and another one's going to come, then another one's going to. That they were describing those kings.
The reference of the 7 hills in which the woman sits, Rome was known as the kingdom of the 7 mountains.
And I've also read other commentaries that say Jerusalem was built on 7 hills, so that doesn't help me at all.
Well,
still could be.
I think some of the imagery. The one thing that Rome has that Jerusalem doesn't have in the context of this story is the power of Rome.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And we are basically being told that, I mean, this woman runs it.
And you can see in the Gospels where Jesus prophesied certain things, you can see that Rome has a great harlot, or if that's who she's identified at. Jerusalem doesn't have much power against her, because in the first century they're always attacking, and then eventually they destroy almost the whole city.
By what I
Rome.
would consider the great prostitute. Yes.
Rome.
Yeah. So for me, I know there are segments of out there, but I'm just going to come out and say it. I tend to believe that this is Rome. There's too many things there that give it. But if you don't have to agree with me. Hey, nobody's twisting anybody's arms here. The other thing that the description in here is you've had 5 bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
The one you've got, you're about to lose, but you're going to get an 8th one, but he's not going to be any better. So, which I honestly believe we really need to pay attention to this, because every time we have an election, we think the next one is going to be the one who does it all.
I heard a preacher say one time, you know who the worst preacher in the world is?
The one you got now?
The one you just fired.
Oh, okay.
You know who the best preacher in the world is? The one you just hired. So
Yeah.
it all depends on, here you've got 7 heads, 7 hills, 7 kings. And all those things fit together. They fit together for these people in the first century understand. They understood who this was, one who is and one who's to come. They understood all that. We don't,
Yeah.
but they did.
Yeah, and the pictures that's being drawn for them is they understand the battle that they are in, and we really get some really good battle language here in the next few verses. Verse 12. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose, and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will wage war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will triumph over them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers.
When you read that paragraph, if we are on the right track, if we're going in the right direction, when he talks about those 10 kings, that could have been the Herods who ruled in Jerusalem, along with Jerusalem, or it could have been the Judean rulers. It could have been the Herods, it could have been the Judean rulers, it could have been the Caesars.
Yeah.
But I still go
They
back
were
to
puppets to the harlot.
Yeah. Rome put those men in Jerusalem to say, you're going to do what we tell you to do.
Yeah.
And puppets is a good description of that.
And basically that's what this says here. They've been given authority, but as soon as they're given it, what do? They give it to someone else. Mm-hmm. And which entails the fact that again, this imagery of the war that goes on in a spiritual reality or realm that we don't see, but is just as real as you and I are in this plane.
Yes.
And that we don't see. The book of Daniel, one of the hard things about the book of Daniel is, especially every time I read the story of where Daniel's praying, and he's prayed for, 10 days?
I don't remember.
14 days, something like that, and the angel shows up and says, I've been trying to get here since you started praying.
Yeah.
And he said, but I was in a battle with...
He came from another country.
Yeah, I was in a battle with the angel of Persia, or whatever it was. And you think to yourself, okay, is that what goes on? And it is. It's a reality that we don't see. And the part that is kind of frustrating is the fact that what I just said will automatically put me in a category of not very intelligent people, because I think there are angels out there, and I think there are people out there beyond what our eyes can see, because science tells us what you can see is all there is.
That's what Clarence told Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
When he said, do they not believe in angels? And He said, well, yeah, they believe in angels. He said, well, then how come they get scared when they see one? That's when he got kicked out of the bar, by the way.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen It's a Wonderful Life. Well, these objects down through here are tough. All of them are tough. In this chapter that we've looked at, you have this harlot, and she fights against the Lamb's wife. The Lamb's wife is the church, the kingdom of God. And she fights against that group. And you've got all these different identities with the Caesars and the Jewish rulers and the harlot who chases the Lamb's wife. There's all these different ideas that there's two sides.
Yeah.
You got to decide in this judgment who you're going to be. You have to make a judgment about the judgment.
Well, as I heard one person say, and I wanted to use this because I know how much you like the person I'm about to quote, Randy Harris. Randy Harris said there are two teams. There's Satan's team and Jesus' team. Choose wisely, but remember, Jesus' team is won.
It's already over.
It's already done. He's already won. Doesn't mean there's not skirmishes still going on in this realm that we're living in.
It's like if somebody explained something to us, we'd say, well, we know that. We already read the book.
Yeah.
We know what's in there. It's kind of knowing how the movie's going to end.
Yeah. But knowing it and living your life as if it's true are two different things.
In verse 13, I think we're almost down there. In verse 13, it says, these people, these 7 kings, these people who were fighting for the harlot and fighting for old Jerusalem, they are of one mind, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So this beast that comes out of the land, comes out of the sea, is even more powerful after he gets there, because these people give him their power and their authority. And they will make war on the Lamb. Okay, now that's interesting. When there's a war, usually somebody loses and somebody wins. The Lamb will conquer them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called chosen and faithful.
Followers. Yeah. It sets a descriptive analogy for us in this battle, that there is only 2 teams involved. There's 2 armies, and you pick one. And here's the thing that part of first part of verse 13 that I don't know if everybody thinks. If you don't choose Jesus, in essence, you have given whatever you have, purpose, power, and authority, to someone else. Mm-hmm. And that someone else is the beast or Satan. You give it to him. Yeah. He now rules your life. He now has the authority over your life. He now has a purpose for your life because you're falling into his path. Of course, I know this analogy is put for the 10 kings, but that truth just doesn't hold just for the kings.
Well, look at the words he uses to describe the Lamb. In verse 14, he will conquer, the Lamb will conquer them, because he's the Lord, because he's the King
of kings,
because he's been called, he's the chosen one, and he's faithful.
Well, with him are the chosen, called,
so
faithful.
If you want to be on the right side, even though we've told you, we've read it and we know how it ends, if you want to be on the right side, that's your judgment that you'll have to make a decision about.
Yeah, everyone chooses. Everyone chooses. Verse 15. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits are multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over to the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth.
Did verse 18 help you out?
Oh, well, much of what came down through there helped me out to see that it's basically, that woman is Rome, because Rome was the greatest at that time. It was.
And Rome had dominion over all the kings of the earth.
All the kings of the earth. And
when you talked about the Roman Empire, you're talking about the whole world.
You're talking about the whole world at that time. I mean, there's little pockets that Rome couldn't get to, but nobody who's anywhere near thousands of miles of this nation.
But it's nice to know that these two groups are going against each other, and then they're fighting a common enemy, and then they start fighting themselves, because it says all these people, the peoples, the multitudes, the nations, and the tongues, and the 10 horns that you saw, and the beast will hate the harlot. So now they're turning on each other. They're fighting against each other. They want to go after this common enemy, but now they're fighting each other. She will be desolate, she will be naked, and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. She doesn't have too good of an ending.
No.
But,
and throughout history, has it not... Name me empires that operated like, went out and conquered everybody, who doesn't end up getting conquered by somebody else. It's just...
Matter of fact, was that guy from England who was William the Conqueror?
Yeah.
I mean, weren't there any other conquerors?
Yeah, I mean, Great Britain's control of Europe has up and down, up and down. Of course, now it's been pretty stable for the last couple hundred years, I guess. But
because we've helped them out.
Yeah, but we've also had a couple hundred years, as it relates to the big picture, is not that big a deal. It's just a blimp in time. And here we are at times thinking, hey, we're the great nation, and right now we're fighting one another for control. And
every month we have a different enemy.
Yeah.
And it's just the scary thing about this is they're asking, how long is this going to take place, this punishment, this judgment? And John writes, giving over their royal power to the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. So again, he's telling them, hold on for a little bit longer, because God has prophesied this is going to take place. He's on your side, you're on his side, so just hang in there, because when the words of God are fulfilled, that's when the beast and 666 and the harlot, they will all lose their power. Don't put your confidence and trust in them, because they will lose their power.
And you know, today, even if we extrapolate everything we just read about what happened during that first century and going into the second century, there was still yet people who were hurt, who had to deal with the powers that were in that time. And there's always this concept where you think to yourself, okay, am I holding on to something that's not there? Have I put my faith in the wrong thing? This book...
Am I climbing up the wrong ladder?
Yeah. This book is, from Jesus' perspective, is telling you, no, you're in the right place.
Yeah.
I know this stuff is seductive. I know these things seem like, man, this would be great. And Satan continues this same formula. He seduces people away from God with things that they think will make them happy. And that's the world we live in today.
And part of that seduction comes from the idea that people are in the world in serious conditions, and they do find better places to put their tent down or build their house. If you saw the caravan that was coming from Honduras last week, I can't remember how many thousands of people they said was in there. People just have the clothes that they got on, the shoes that they got on. They're maybe carrying a baby or have a stroller.
Looking for someplace better.
They're looking for someplace that's better than Honduras, because you can get killed real easy in Honduras.
Yeah.
And those people fighting. It's just by the grace of God that you find a place where they're not shooting each other,
Yeah.
where they're not in rebellion, where there's not chaos.
Well, again,
like that.
That's my point a while ago, was like, I don't know where you go today. I know there are some a lot worse than others, but there is no utopia here on this earth.
Those people from Honduras are probably, as they're traveling along on foot, maybe they get a message from somewhere, maybe they stop where there's a place where you can look at a TV, and they see our people storming our Capitol building. They're probably going, is it worth going up there? We thought this was something different.
Yeah.
And now it's sending a different message totally.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in a precarious place and time. Well, that will end our discussion this week, as we hope to continue doing these things again. We are recording 2 today, so because I won't be here next week to do this one. Do you have anything you want to add before we kind of end this one?
In 17:18, in verse 18, the woman that you saw is the great city which has dominion over the kings of the earth. We've already talked about the possibility, is that Rome or is that Jerusalem? But what I want to continue to remind you is, they saw the great city which has dominion over the kings of the earth. That's probably Rome, and it's probably all the countries that were under her leadership. But he brings up the kings again. Do not forget when you get to chapter 21 and 22 what happens to the kings.
Yes. Yes. Well, we look forward to seeing you again next week. We hope you've enjoyed this. And as we get toward the end, we're working our way there. Hopefully, we can move past it and use this information that was given to people who were dealing with things way beyond what we're experiencing in our present world. God bless, and on behalf of Steve and I, see you next week. Wave over here, Steve. We're going to wave bye.